Hi everybody, this is April 9th, 2026, and I've been posting these videos as a form of recovery from the trauma of watching my little brother, Paul Kieran's, then 64 with Down syndrome, be locked away by the British Columbia New Democratic Party government, David Eby as leader, Nikki Sharma as Attorney General, for 588 days. They locked Paul away from me, his last surviving local family member and visitor, locked him up in his group home on September 12th of 2022, after I complained to the Burnaby police when I discovered the government had created a secret and what I alleged to be a fraudulent forged power of attorney so that they could give Paul the COVID-19 shot on February 6th of 2021. So after they locked Paul up, as I said, for 588 days, they had appointed my 82-year-old Catholic nun sister, who moved out and had never lived with Paul and did not understand his speech or communication, and who lived 4,000 kilometers away in Ontario. My sister, May Kieran's, had only met Paul on a few occasions over the course of his life, whereas my other sisters and family members here in Greater Vancouver had cared for Paul on weekends and holidays. So when I complained to the police about the fraudulent forged power of attorney, the government ordered the nun to do something, and her response was through her lawyers, was to terminate forever, permanently, my visits with Paul and his visits with me. As I said, I was his last surviving family member from a big family of 6 adult children and my mom, who had moved to Greater Vancouver. So I did everything I could legally to try and restore my visits. I went to the Supreme Court of Canada twice, trying to restore visits. I went to the British Columbia New Human Rights Tribunal, the tribunal that just assessed a $750,000 fine against elderly school trustee Barry Newfield, for saying that he believed that there was only 2 genders. So after Paul had been locked away, the nun did not move him to be closer to her in North Bay, Ontario, or she did not move here to be closer to him. So he was locked up for 588 days, and then they tell me, I found out 2 days after the fact that he had had a stroke at his group home. And when my sister flew in from Ontario, she allowed me at that point to have a 10-minute-a-day visit at Burnaby Hospital. Paul appeared to me to be recovering remarkably well. When I said my name, I hadn't seen him for 588 days. When I said my name, he grabbed my hand and squeezed it so tight. And he sat up. I brought him a book that a neighbor had given me for him. He turned the pages perfectly, looked at the photos appropriately. It was a book about Hollywood movie stars. Out of the blue, on April 21st of 2024, while I was visiting Paul in the hospital, I got a call from the Burnaby RCMP police saying that they had been ordered by their oversight agency in Ottawa to reopen the investigation into the fraudulent and forged power of attorney. They had never interviewed me. They had never looked at my documents, but they had been ordered by their oversight agency to reopen the investigation. And then they sent me a letter, which was a month old, saying that from the detachment supervisor, saying that they had been ordered by Ottawa to reopen the investigation. Once the nun found out that Paul had, or that the RCMP police had been ordered to reopen the investigation and that they had contacted me, Paul was dead within hours. So when I went in to visit him on April 22nd, the nuns wouldn't look me in the eye, but she said to me through gritted teeth, "Say goodbye to Paul, he's dying." I could see that the oxygen mask that he had been wearing for the previous 10 days had been removed, and that he appeared to me to be dead at that point. He appeared to have been sedated to death. I had complained to the nursing staff that he appeared to be oversedated. There was no reason to sedate him. He was struggling to recover from a stroke. So after that visit, I got an email from the nun saying that Paul had died. After Paul died, the nun flew in again from North Bay, and with her 2 law firms. She had an Ottawa law firm and one of the largest law firms in Canada. Casey Deanshaw was her lawyer in Vancouver, and they had a 4-day hearing that I could not attend in full because I have a life-threatening cardiac condition. I had a medical certificate saying I couldn't attend for more than 2 hours per day. The Judge Judith Hoffman heard the application to have me declared a vexatious litigant. So to take away all of my basic human rights, I had practiced law, and for the most part very successfully in British Columbia for 26 years. But Justice Judith Hoffman went on for 2 full days rather than the 2 hours that I was allowed to appear in court. And she made a finding. She basically adopted the submissions of the nun's lawyers and found me a vexatious litigant. So the government of British Columbia took away all of Paul's rights, and then they encouraged the nun to take away all of my rights, the basic rights you have to defend yourself in court. I can't even file a response to a suit against me without permission of a judge. I applied for leave to appeal that draconian decision to the Supreme Court of Canada, and after 6 months, that was my application to even appeal that was dismissed. So while all of this was going on, I was preoccupied with trying to restore Paul's freedom, which had been taken away by David Eby and the British Columbia New Democratic Party government. But after Paul died and after I had been declared a vexatious litigant, I had time to see what had been going on, and that the law as I had learned it when I went to law school I went to University of British Columbia Law School. I was a government psychologist assessing adult disabled people for the purposes of assessing what benefits they should receive. And then in 1988, I went to law school. I practiced as a federal prosecutor for about 3 years, and then I practiced as a family lawyer until 2016. But what I discovered after I had had my rights taken away was that since 2015, there was a decision of the Supreme Court of Canada. 9 unelected judges who were federal government employees made a decision reversing themselves. There had been an earlier decision, Canada versus Sue Rodriguez, the Sue Rodriguez case, where NDP Member of Parliament Sven Robinson had really pushed for this woman, Sue Rodriguez, to be killed. And the Supreme Court of Canada said no, that's against public policy for medical doctors and nurses to kill Canadian citizens. It's not a form of medical treatment, and it devalues life. But with the groups like Death with Dignity had pushed through the application to be killed of a woman named Kay Carter, who had actually died. She had gone to Switzerland and been killed by a Swiss doctor. And so the case was really moot, but the Supreme Court of Canada delivered an anonymous, unanimous, so there was no judge's name on this decision reversing itself. And it was done unanimously. At the time, the Chief Justice was a woman named Beverly McLaughlin, who used to be my hero. I met her once when I was in law school at a Women in the Law conference. Obviously, she's not my hero now, but they reversed themselves on the basis that they said that it wasn't fair to Kay Carter, that by the time she became terminally ill, she might not be able to actually commit suicide herself. So therefore, the taxpayer should step in and pay a physician or a nurse to kill her, which is obviously a reversal of 40,000 years of human practice of not killing our elderly and disabled members of our community, and certainly where the since 1208, the Magna Carta before King John, the lords made him sign it, saying that the crown, among other things, could not act capriciously and take the lives of citizens capriciously. But since that decision, right after that decision, that the Chief Justice Beverly McLaughlin was hired by the Chinese Hong Kong government to sit on their Court of Appeal on a case-by-case basis from 2018 till 2024. And there's no euthanasia. Euthanasia is a capital offense in China. So the doctors and nurses cannot kill Chinese citizens. She went to a jurisdiction, the brain trust behind this decision reversing itself and allowing Canadians to be killed by their government, went immediately to a jurisdiction where it is a capital offense, and worked for the Chinese government, rather, Chinese Hong Kong government, for 6 years. So that's the background. And I had been posting little videos on YouTube and on LinkedIn and Twitter, just describing this system that has careered off any possible guardrail. In the decision of the Supreme Court, by the Supreme Court of Canada, the judgment gave Canada, the federal government, a year to develop legislation to protect people from undue influence, coercion, the normal things that you would imagine a person would respond to in consenting to being killed, to being executed extrajudicially by the government. I practiced family law, as I said, for 26 years. And to even get a divorce in Canada, you have to apply sworn affidavits, and the judges must review them, and a judge has to sign off on it. And if they're not satisfied, there has to be a hearing. But if they're satisfied by the paperwork, the judge will actually sign off. But about 50% of divorce applications are rejected as being incomplete, even done by me. At that time, I was a professional doing divorces constantly. About 50% of divorce applications would be rejected as having typos or mistakes, or not having sufficient information, or the judge wanted to ask more questions. But in order to be executed by the Canadian government now by a taxpayer-funded doctor or nurse, a regular doctor or nurse, they don't need to know the patient or the person whatsoever. They just have to sign a piece of paper. There's no legal review whatsoever. No judge signs off on this. And it's called the nonprofit society that really pushed the woman in the 2015 decision that changed the law in Canada was called Death with Dignity. And I just want to say, newsflash, there's no such thing as death with dignity. We don't know what death is. It's a mystery. But I had asked, as I said yesterday, I had asked Copilot, the artificial intelligence, I just said, tell me what the arguments are against euthanasia. And please never call it medical assistance in dying. At MAID, people go, oh, MAID this, MAID that, we're hip, we're cool. We use the lingo that the government has given us. Medical is from the Greek word to heal, and from the Latin word to heal. It's a verb, to heal. And nobody is healed by being killed. We don't know we know we're killing somebody, but we don't know what that is. We don't know. Do they go on to heaven or hell or purgatory? Is there reincarnation? Is it just this ceasing of the existence of that person? We just don't know. So I asked Copilot just to give me the argument against euthanasia, and this is what it said. There was 3 main points. Number one, that no one can consent to being killed because we don't know what it is. We don't know what we're consenting to. Like, for example, I'm Catholic, and I believe that when you die, you go to heaven, or if you committed mortal sin, you're going to go to hell. If you haven't, in other circumstances, you might go to purgatory. That's what I believe. I believe that my loved ones are in heaven. I have a sister who believes that it's just you cease to exist and there's nothing, and your body rots away, and that's the end of that. And there's many cultures, probably the most prevalent belief in the world would be that there's reincarnation, and that would be in India. But we just don't know. So when you sign an informed consent, there's no such thing. And that is part of the reason why that there has not been euthanasia, or the killing of the sick and injured and elderly, for 40,000 years. The Neanderthals didn't do it, and Homo sapiens didn't do it. And the Magna Carta determined that King John couldn't do it 1,000 years ago, or 800, I think it's 815 years ago. So the first point is that you can't give or get informed consent. The thing about death is that it's irreversible. There is no appeal. You can't change your mind. There is a case recently in Canada where an elderly woman did change her mind. She had signed the paper. It's just a little piece of paper. She'd signed the paper, and the two medical, all it takes is the signature of any two medical practitioners who don't need to know the patient, and they don't need to be an expert in whatever their condition might be, and that of the person. And this elderly woman had signed the paper, but then she changed her mind. And her husband, who there was a question that he had put undue influence on her. I mean, with the baby boomers passing away, there's going to be a huge transfer of wealth and untold incentive to put coercion on these people to make them die quicker than, living and using up their estates. So this elderly woman changed her mind, but they found, and so one of the witnesses withdrew and said, well, I'm not going to go ahead with this, and crossed their name off the piece of paper. They found another witness and said, well, she's already, this woman's already signed it once, so we're going to kill her anyways, and she was killed. And the part of the reason why we ended capital punishment, or the killing of the state in Canada for people that had committed capital offenses, was that there is no appeal, and you can make a mistake and you can't go back. Death is irreversible. And then finally, this is the argument of the fallacy of implementation. So with communist and socialist governments around the world, which have resulted in the deaths that I can think of, perhaps 300 million people, 100 million in China were killed by Mao Zedong. In my lifetime, 100 million people were killed during the communist revolution by Mao Zedong. And I remember my dad telling me about it when I was a tiny little girl. But there is the fallacy, it's called the fallacy of implementation. So what the Supreme Court of Canada in February of 2015 said was that the government of Canada had a year to put in a system of implementation to ensure that there wasn't undue influence or improper killing of Canadian citizens by doctors and nurses. But the reason why we don't kill our sick and elderly people who even may appear to be suffering, or who say that they're suffering, the reason we don't kill them is because there is no system that's ever been invented to prevent the misuse of killing. It's so final, it's so irreversible that we don't do it. And the Supreme Court of Canada, for some reason, maybe it had pressure brought to it bear by the Chinese Communist government that is clearly infiltrated the entire Canadian government, because since this decision was made in February of 2015, by July of 2026, more than 100,000 innocent, vulnerable Canadian citizens, mostly Canadian-born women, will have been killed by regular doctors and nurses extrajudicially with no legal or judicial oversight whatsoever. But what I don't know what other word to use, and silly, Supreme Court of Canada said was that Canada had a year to invent a system that had not yet been invented in 40,000 years to ensure that there was no misuse, that there were guardrails set up to protect innocent, vulnerable Canadian citizens. And that's called the fallacy of implementation. Oh, we will come up with a system of doing this that protects people, when in 40,000 years, no system on earth has ever invented a system of safely protecting the rights and preventing the misuse of this euthanasia. So those are the three reasons that's the argument that Copilot gave me, is that there can be no, number one, there's no such thing as consent. Number two, it's irreversible. This particular intervention by the state is irreversible. There's no way to appeal once the person is dead. That's it. You can't correct it. You can't go back. And three, the fallacy of implementation. It is a philosophical fallacy. It's impossible. It's like saying the Supreme Court of Canada giving the federal government a year to change giraffes into hippopotamuses. Well, the reason that no one's ever changed a giraffe into a hippopotamus is because it can't be done. And you cannot implement a system of killing people that can be done fairly and will prevent all the built-in inherent abuses brought on by human nature and by government impacts on human beings. So that's it for now. I just want to say that I saw another Conservative member of Parliament who crossed the floor with Mark Carney bribing or providing some incentive for her. Her name was Marilyn Gladu, spelled Gladu. She was a staunch Conservative. She was elected by people like me who voted Conservative. I just want to say, Marilyn Gladu, I've got a life-threatening cardiac condition, and I put my life at risk to go up and down stairs in my mountainous riding of Coquitlam, Port Moody. And I walked up and down the stairs of 663 homes and knocked on the doors of 663 homes to support the Conservative Party of Canada and my candidate, Paul Lambert. And I put my life at risk, and you, for whatever bribe or incentive you were given by that evildoer, I don't even have words to describe Mark Carney. The worst thing I can say about him is what my mother called people like him. That's lace curtain Irish. So I'm Irish too, just like him. I could have an Irish citizenship and 27 citizenships in the European Union too, but I don't, because I'm a Canadian. And my mother would call somebody like Mark Carney lace curtain Irish. The worst thing my sainted mother could say about anyone is that he's a lace curtain Irish, which means that he's an elitist, he's a World Economic Forum jerk, he could care less about democracy, and if King Charles III had anything to say, he should take him around the back and have a word with him. He's an evildoer. He's the most evil person. And I put a list on my Facebook page if you want to see the list of all the evil things. If you need to argue about how evil Mark Carney is. But I can start by saying he's lace curtain Irish. I love you all. Please take care. And let's bring this evil, never say maid or medical assistants in dying again. Please start by using human, normal words, not the propaganda made up by this evil government. I love you all. Take care. And let's bring euthanasia to an end.